A quarter to the hour of 8, a very warm welcome for those that are just joining us from wherever you are watching Morning at NTV. I am Chris Higenya, and it's time for the Kickstarter discussion where we shall be examining Kenya's extradition of members of Uganda's opposition party, the Forum for Democratic Change members. But most importantly, we shall try to get around the modalities that are the extradition law. Extradition, the tendency or the ability for one nation to be able to hand over legally members of another country detained, arrested, or seeking caution in another country. There's a lot to it, and of course I have with me an eminent panel that is going to help us understand what is at play, because that is very much important. The politics of the region must be understood from within the various aspects that it does manifest. The president in Kenya is in a spot of bother, and when actions like these are undertaken, it brings to the question, or rather the question to the fore, what is happening in as far as relations between Uganda and Kenya are concerned. I have with me the executive director at the Center for Constitutional Governance, Sarah Bireete. She's on my immediate left. Many thanks for joining us again this morning.
Thank you for inviting me, and good morning, viewers.
We also have Dr. Tolit Atiya. He's a security expert and strategic thinker, one who understands matters within the region. I'm glad we have you this morning.
Thank you, Chris, and good morning.
We also have with us a lawyer who, of course, must be on top of anything that is extradition. Should be able to thresh it out for us. Many thanks for joining us, George Musisi. It's always a pleasure to have you on board.
Thank you, Chris. Good morning, viewers, and pleasure to be here with the eminent panel. I'm the, I don't deserve to sit on this table of eminent persons, sure. But
wait a minute. Okay, that means I am honored. Lady and gentlemen, let me begin with the lady. For purposes of not for purposes of novelty, somebody might be like, okay, ladies first, but your understanding of these political matters. Let's suspend that for now. Yeah, for purposes of understanding the motives behind the extradition of the members of the Democratic Party who were arrested in Kenya, before we come to what extradition is, what's going to happen, and why it happened the way it was, what were FDC members doing in Kenya in that particular, or rather in those particular circumstances?
Well, the FDC members were attending a training camp on leadership in Kisumu before the arrest. I think that the meeting had just started on the day they arrested them. They had been selected to go for training through the partners and the friends of the FDC Katonga faction for training for new leadership on communication. Communication is a changing terrain in governance. We have the new media, we have the traditional media.
That's right.
We have challenges of artificial intelligence and its impact on elections and the leadership, with changes like deepfakes, with changes in data mining, and the people who man these aspects in any organization must keep training and retraining. And this is one of the activities that the FDC leaders had gone to engage in. There were a total of 34 men and 2 women, and they were arrested on the day the training was supposed to start. Kenyan authorities, including the regional police commander in Kisumu, the governor, Kisumu, and other leaders, have denied any knowledge or involvement in the arrest. Meaning that the arrest was not a formal operation by the government of Kenya, because the Kenyan government officials were never part of it, and they don't have knowledge of any wrongdoing. The governor Kisumu was aware of the training in his territory, and he was surprised about the kidnap of the FDC members by elements from the government. So when you have such an occurrence, it has broader implications on cross-border law enforcement, on treatment of opposition in the East African community, but also greater implications on the East African community itself, because it's a violation of the treaty. It's a violation of the common markets protocol on free movement of persons, goods and services. It's a violation of all bilateral and regional agreements, as well as international law in the region. It violates diplomatic conduct between two countries. The procedures of arrest and extradition of individuals from one country to another are clearly known under established legal procedures, but also international norms that should be followed in respect of human rights, legal protection, but also diplomatic protocols. In addition, Kenya and Uganda are members of the International Conference on Great Lakes. They have a protocol on peace and security, as well as a protocol on negative forces. Because the allegation by government is that these people were engaged in training on terrorism. That falls under the two protocols on negative forces, as well as peace and security. And the conduct of the two governments violates these protocols, because those protocols provide for extradition procedures, as well as elements of reallocation, where the human rights of individuals involved are at stake in their country of origin, reallocation to a third country. And we've seen this between Uganda and Rwanda, when the likes of Manda and Chakabare were in Rwanda. They had to be reallocated to Canada, a third country of their choice, because the same allegations of the PRA rebels were the cause
against them.
Yes. So we have had these experiences, but also under the tripartite mechanism between Uganda, Rwanda, and DRC. Extradition procedures follow the known legal international procedures, and nobody has violated them, even at the height when we had issues like crossed borders between two countries and many security allegations at stake as compared to what is prevailing between Uganda and Kenya. This is a diplomatic embarrassment, it's a shame, and it's a violation of all our national and regional protocols.
Well, interesting that the Kenya High Commission is yet to come up with a conclusive statement on that particular incident. Of course, events here in Uganda that followed that particular diplomatic spat saw protesters yesterday arrested as they were going to the High Commission to, well, demonstrate their dissatisfaction with what happened to the members of the Democratic Party. I'll be coming to Dr. Tolit Atiya very shortly for the strategic imperative in this when it comes to the greater, broader picture, rather, as Bireete has said. But let me understand what the framework is right now with regard to extradition of individuals in any one country to another, especially within the confines of the East African community. Because we are driving one thing at one time, and then we appear to have a lot of fits and starts that do not actually favor the fast tracking of any cooperation protocols that are in place.
Thank you, Chris. Like Sarah said, extradition is a legal process. And of course, the problem we have with these particular facts is that they are both shrouded, both countries are shrouding in mystery.
Okay.
We have no official government position from Uganda, neither do we have an official position from Kenya. So we can only rely on the facts as stated by the accused persons, and that these people lawfully accessed Kenya through the customs and through the usual immigration travels. They went to a place where they were expected and they checked in. For whatever reason, now we are told that it was supposed to be training. And in the very night when they just checked in, they were apparently arrested from their rooms. They are claiming that some of the people who were arresting them were speaking Luganda. They were driven all the way up back to Kampala, back to Uganda. Now the issue is, it's not that Kenyan authorities drove us and handed us over at the border to the Ugandans.
Yeah.
That they were driven by the same people.
The people who are okay, I was going to use the word abduct, who arrested them
yes,
in Kenya,
drove them all the way up to Kampala.
To Uganda.
So it's not like Kenyan authority. And coming back, they didn't even go through the customs.
Their passports are not stamped.
Yes. Now, when we talk about extradition, extradition is a legal process. Extradition is where a country, and yes, we have a law, Kenya has a law, and international norms. And the common thread in all those laws is that if there is a fugitive, if there is a criminal, or a suspect, we have a convicted criminal, or we have a suspect whom we have charged, because there's no law which stops Uganda from charging a person, even in absentia.
Yeah, that's right.
It's that he's hiding in that country. You make a request to that country. It's a formal process. You make a request, and the person is given a hearing before extradition. He's given a hearing in court, and that is what both Ugandan laws and Kenyan laws say. A person is given a hearing, you are given to explain why you shouldn't be extradited. In fact, international laws prescribe that people who are charged of largely political crimes shouldn't be extradited back. So you're supposed to be given a chance to be heard as to whether you'll get fair hearing. That is why, that is meant to protect people running away from political opponents, people who are facing hostility as a result of their political choices, and so on and so forth. So what happened cannot, under any stroke of a chance, be called an extradition. Even if you have to think that was a deportation, because every country, both Uganda and Kenya,
even deportation has its
have a chance to deport a person. Even deportation is a process.
It's a process.
You're actually also given a chance to be heard where you shouldn't be deported, whether you are here in this country legally or illegally. Now, like I've mentioned, the facts as we have them, these people accessed Kenya legally. So the question is, who arrested them? We even saw the governor issuing a statement saying, asking his country to account that please issue a statement. How comes that our visitors were treated this way? And of course, as per the charge sheet, which they arraigned in Nakawa, they're saying that they had gone for a terrorism training. The ingredients of the facts of terrorism are that training. Now, we should remember that these people say that they had not even spent 48 hours in Kisumu. That's right. So I think it was a training which was going to happen, the terrorism training. So which other people, who was going to train them? Has Kenya charged other corresponding people who were abetting this terrorism? Has Kenya charged any other people? The hosts? Because I don't imagine that they were going to train themselves in terrorism. I'm imagining they were trainers in Kisumu. So all these facts don't make sense. It points down to one issue, which logically makes sense, that this may be a political persecution. When it comes to FDC, incidentally, in 2011, after the elections and we had to walk to work, some FDC members, including Ingrid, including the Honorable Mwijuche, Sam Mugumya, who's now in exile, were charged with terrorism. Ironically, in the same court, Nakawa Chief Magistrate's Court, and they were presented as a result of the walking to work. So this use of very powerful offenses to handle political opponents is not new. We've seen it, the use of the law to persecute political opponents, and this has that written all over it. Interesting,
but the new dynamic here is the fact that it's now a diplomatic endgame. Kenya being in position to facilitate, because this one should be facilitation. I do not think Ugandan operatives can go and execute a mission in Kenya without the Kenyan government being aware.
The reason why it will not go into the diplomatic spot, I think there's some bit of collusion by the two governments. So the government is not offended. There's some bit of collusion. So the people offended are Ugandans who were visitors, and any Kenyan should feel offended. But the two governments seem to be collusion, because I don't think that whichever operatives entered to arrest was not with the cooperation of the Kenyan government. They are certainly in collusion.
All right, the picture is what matters, or the perception. And this one is for the strategist, especially when it comes to security issues within the region. At a certain point, the Kenyan government must or will be seen to get uncomfortable about the fact that something like this can happen. But it has already happened. What is the game at play?
Thank you, Chris. I first of all would like to agree with the account that Sarah has made. Those are the facts as are presented at the moment. The Good Counsel has delved into matters of the law, and that is the law. So the question is, where does this leave us? I think to have a good comprehension of this matter, it is good to try and give it a little bit of context, particularly in terms of Kenya. You are saying probably Kenya will get uncomfortable. They are already uncomfortable. They are actually in a very unenviable position
right now,
because they are sort of caught up in a triangular nexus. When you look at it in terms of, you know, geopolitical undertakings. One, Kenya is an immediate neighbor. Sarah pointed out that both Uganda and Kenya actually are undersigned to a number of international conventions, including the East Africa Community Treaty. That relationship is defined, you know, within the nexus of law and regulations. And if you look at the story as it is evolving, you can clearly see that so many red lines have been crossed. The other point I would like to make is that for those who may not be in the know, Chris, Kenya, by the way, as a member of the East African community, in terms of the broader aspect of peace and security in the region, I think is getting itself nested in a very awkward place. This is not the first. I want to draw your attention to the conflict in Southern Sudan. You know that particularly the opposition in Southern Sudan, the Southern Sudan conflict, which at the moment is undergoing a series of negotiations. They have rejected or opted out of continuing any peace discussions in Kenya. And one of the arguments they are making is that most of their members are being harassed, terrorized, arrested, and humiliated. For those who probably are seeking refuge, who have sought refuge in Kenya, and even those who come from the diaspora and elsewhere for these meetings in Nairobi, for some reason or the other, find themselves picked up and are in cells in Juba. Now, this is particularly a character unbecoming in international relations conduct. So Kenya finds itself in a very awkward position. Now, having said that, with what has happened in Uganda, simply tells you that Kenya is not new at this game. And the fact that the FDC leaders are citing the hand of Kenya in this matter should also be treated with some salt, you know, some pinch of salt. It cannot be, you know, it can't be a matter, you know, as flagrant as many political statements are made. There is some ounce of truth to it. Kenya has already been involved in this. Now, the other bit in the context of this matter is that we've had a situation like this before, and Uganda, or the government, actually was quick, you know, to come out officially and say this is not proper. And probably rightly so. And this was involving the dissidents of Rwanda. You remember the incident in the police. And some people were arraigned. So you ask yourself, what is this double stance game? You know? For the Rwandese who were dissidents here, allegedly being picked and taken back, or kidnapped and taken back to Rwanda, that was causing an international breach. And Uganda stood out to it. Now, the same Uganda is today finding itself in a situation where it is also being accused of the same activity. So in a nutshell, what am I saying? This posits a very difficult situation in this region, because this Great Lakes region has already experienced a lot of conflict, particularly in the last 25 years. Intra and with the potential that spills over. We have seen there is an active conflict in Burundi, and there are many refugees in Tanzania, in Uganda, and probably actually in Rwanda, because it has ethnic undertones. Rwanda has really never come to settle. You know, it has refugees in all these places. Now, of course, this is really not new. These states have had military cooperation, including counterterrorism, cross-border counterterrorism operations. Because if you looked at it as far back, for instance, 1971, the Amin era. In 1980, we had the Tanzanians aid Uganda militarily. We had the Rwandese live here in 1994, although government has never officially, you know, accepted that they supported the Rwandese soldiers who left here and now form the Rwanda government. So there is a very intricate relationship amongst these states.
Okay.
And the peace and security of this region strongly relies on that relationship. So when you see member states begin to fiddle with this relationship, particularly now when the tempo at the East African community, I think, is at its most low. In fact, some analysts are beginning to have the courage to predict that the East African community
another collapse is on the way.
Can actually collapse. And these could be triggers on the way.
Okay, that's interesting and very deep analysis, no doubt about it. But what if, I should be able to ask the question from the person who is watching, might be a lay person, for example. What if this is positioning ahead of 2026 and the Forum for Democratic Change maybe needed the latest tactic to demonstrate that it still has the muscle to be able to put on some formidable charge, especially when it comes to what is going to be happening in 2026.
Are you saying they kidnapped themselves?
No, I'm the politics of the country, we've seen incidents where people or institutions, parties are happy to be involved in something in order to drive a certain agenda, especially ahead of an election.
Chris, for the record, no human being wants to lose their personal liberty for anything.
Politicians have a tendency to...
No. And I say no as a human rights defender, as an international lawyer and constitutional lawyer. There is no person who can willingly surrender their liberty for anything. Having said that, I want to draw your attention to the extradition of Jamil Mukulu from Tanzania. Jamil Mukulu was a renowned leader of ADF, an internationally recognized terrorist organization now linked to the Islamic, fundamentalism unit. The extradition of Jamil Mukulu took about 3 months, with all evidence of his leadership in ADF killings and terror activities. But the government of Tanzania could not create any shortcut for Jamil Mukulu to be arrested by Uganda government.
Do you think Kenya
they had to apply with legal grounds and evidence to justify his arrest, even when it was internationally known. They had to go through the extradition request with hearings for 3 months in a judicial review. And until when the order was granted, Jamil defended himself. He preferred to be tried in another country. Uganda had to fight to bring Jamil Mukulu here. So if FDC people were indeed involved in terror training, given that they are a political party, a recognized political party in this country, all these considerations should have happened. But that aside, how do you send people who are not security officers of Kenya, of a host country, to arrest anyone. The people speaking Luganda, do you think they were Kenyans? And if indeed, then how come...
We have Ugandans who speak Swahili, so Kenyans can also speak
Okay, so how come the police in Kisumu is not aware of this process? If it was an arrest, how come the police is not aware? I think the shortest you can describe what happened is a kidnap. A kidnap of Ugandans in a foreign country, and Kenya must explain. Are Ugandans safe in their country? There have been allegations of many kidnaps, by the way, of opposition groups. Not so many in Kenya. Raids, we have reports. Many people calling back and saying our place has been raided from the time President Ruto took over. We have had situations, for example, most of the NRA fighters were using Kenya. Even when President Moi was not in agreement with Museveni's bush war. The likes of Mama Mbabazi, even the first family, first stayed in Kenya before going to Sweden. Even when President Moi was in support of Obote's government, nobody kidnapped them, nobody extradited in courts them. How come the same government is kidnapping Ugandans who don't agree with it politically from foreign land? And how safe are Ugandans when it comes to East African integration? The Kenya government must explain. I wish FDC could file a court in the East African Court of Justice. Well, if the Kenya government wants to become an enemy state to Ugandans, then we must know where they stand when it comes to implementation of the Common Market Protocol and the East African Treaty.
Well, the Kenya High Commission must be able to give an explanation on exactly how this happened. But let me ask George Musisi, when Ugandan operatives, they must be very specific, can go into Kenya and conduct an operation of that nature. We all know that such operations can be conducted by nations depending on the circumstances or the particular need to do this kind of operation. But what is Uganda's hold on Kenya in all aspects away from the trade? We've had in the past some sentiment that maybe the fact that the Uganda People's Defense Forces and our security organs have a guarantor status within the region, maybe they can leverage some of that reputation and be able to conduct themselves the way they do, especially if the kidnapping, as Sarah Bireete describes it, happened the way it did. Driving into Kenya, kidnapping Ugandans, and driving straight out of Kenya without concern for the immigration laws of that country. It says something about our hold on Kenya's security forces, or am I completely disillusioned in thinking like that?
Of course, the hold lies in the politics. It doesn't lie in any other maybe national interests that we are trying to cover our bases in terms of trade. It lies in the politics. This whole thing called the East African Cooperation, if you've been looking at it, the conflicts and the cooperation largely lies in the politics. That is why you find that even when they are good friends, when it comes to milk and eggs, it has to be a battle. So you're saying that if it's East African Cooperation, ordinarily the mechanism would be working themselves out. It wouldn't take. But when it comes to where it doesn't suit our interests or their interests, it's always tiffs. You see even conflicts elsewhere. You know what is happening between Kinshasa and Kigali. You know what is happening. So the whole thing of East African Cooperation is, one time there was a cooperation of the willing. You remember when some states were saying, let's ignore this one, is moving slowly, it lies in the politics. And then to answer your question, when you talk about Ugandan forces entering Kenya, of course Kenya is not complaining, which is what we said, that there was collusion or connivance between the two states, because certainly whichever operation was conducted with the knowledge of the two countries. So the people who are aggrieved should be Ugandans and Kenyans. And I don't want to look at it as an FDC issue. You know, one of the problems we have in this country is the classical problem of when it's happening to Sarah, it's Sarah's problem. When traders are striking, borders are not concerned. When taxis are striking, the traders are not concerned.
It's until
when they are beating, no other people are saying, no, those ones I think are problematic.
You didn't have to say that.
Now, I'm saying it because I gave an example. I gave an example that FDC itself, in 2011, they were facing these trumped-up charges.
That's right.
And for so many years, FDC. Now it's no stand. And people tend to think that, no, it's... The other day, Paul Akamba, Honorable, was arrested in a very, very shabby manner. And in a manner which has characterized to people of a particular political group. So it was only shocking that suddenly an MP. So for me, I don't want to look at it as an FDC issue. But then two other points I want to make, Chris. And one of them, Sarah, has hinted on it, that over time, since the 70s, Kenya has offered a safe haven for Ugandan exiles, for people fleeing from political persecution, for persecution from their expressions. If you read all these books which have been authored, the last one I think of the Honorable Edward Rugumayo, who fled, was a minister in Amin's government, and was saying how peaceful they were. And one time, Amin had even sent operatives in Kenya to arrest some of them. And they were, throughout the 80s, even people in the last general election, some people who are fleeing persecution have found a peace haven in Kenya. Secondly, if you look at the region where Kenya has come from in terms of democratic freedoms from the Moi era into the Kibaki era, and after the 2020 constitution, they had set themselves on a path of being a regional trailblazer for civil freedoms, where we have courts annulling elections, courts stopping, giving orders that mean they don't. So this certainly is a drawback, and Kenya has a duty to explain, because a drawback on some of the things we've known Kenya for, that it's an oasis of peace where people can run without fear of persecution. So when you have some of these issues and you say that people can be who are going for a training, whom you've legitimately and legally allowed to access your country, every person who enters Uganda, who enters Kenya, after going through the normal procedures, you have a duty to protect them, you as the host country. So if you are to hand them over to any person, there must be some sort of a process. There must be an explanation. So Kenya largely has a duty to explain, and I agree with those people who were unfortunately beaten and arrested and later charged, who are going to issue a protest note. Ideally, it would be Uganda that complained, but now that there is connivance, it's up to the people of Kenya, up to the people of Uganda to ask these questions.
Okay, I don't know exactly what petition will be undertaken and who is leading this particular charge away from the supporters of the Forum for Democratic Change. Is there any concerted effort that is being worked on?
I think the human rights defenders will soon issue a statement on this arrest.
Because that will be very important.
Yeah.
It will set
from the ESC platform. They will.
Okay, let's join Stephen Mbide, who is on ground on a topic that will, of course, add some bit of a perspective to our discussion, and later we shall return and opine on it. A very good morning, Stephen Mbide.
Yes, good morning to you, Chris. You know, one of the 14 FDC leaders who were arrested yesterday when they were trying to proceed towards the Kenya High Commission to present their letter of protest against the Kenyan government over what transpired on the 14th of June is her worship Doreen Nyanjula, the Deputy Lord Mayor for Kampala. Good morning to you.
Good morning. How are you? Okay. Good morning to all the viewers of NTV.
Do you believe that you acted in a way that police says was uncouth? They labeled you a public nuisance.
Well, that is quite absurd. I'm a responsible leader who, of course, when there is injustice, I always stand up to demand for justice. And of course, you are there, NTV. You're covering the whole event. We are very peaceful, by the way, after our press conference at Katonga Road. And we even made it very clear. It was only a few of us that walked to take our protest note to the Kenyan embassy. The majority of our people remained at Katonga Road. So we are very peaceful. We are not walking even in the road until police came in. You know, they decided on us, over 100 of them, cut off the roads, blocked cars, and were surrounded. So they were the nuisance, actually. And it's not the first time they are behaving in that manner. So we are not surprised.
You don't need to get permission from the police, but you can inform the police or wherever you are heading to, the Kenya High Commission. Maybe they were not ready to receive you, maybe they are not even in office. You would have informed them.
Come on. It's not the first time that we are walking. We always walk. So there was nothing unique, actually, by us walking to the Kenyan High Commission, because we had questions for them, and our questions are very legitimate. Like you're aware, we're protesting the kidnap of 36 of our leaders from Kisumu. And we wanted to know from the High Commission, are they aware that we have 36 of our colleagues who are arrested, actually abducted because they broke into their rooms, they were put on gunpoint, they confiscated or stole their laptops, their phones, and so many of their other items. So we wanted to know, are they aware that 36 of our FDC leaders were abducted, tortured, and then brought back to Uganda? We also wanted to know, when did Kenya become a training ground for terrorists? Because they were charged with terrorism. So when did Kenya become a training ground for terrorists? But number 3, we also wanted to know whether Kenya is still safe for Ugandans. Is Kenya still safe for Ugandans? Because we are talking about the East African community, where Ugandans can move through the border of Kenya, and then they go to Kisumu or to Kenya and do whatever they wanted to do. Okay. For those who are not aware, these are leaders who had gone to equip themselves with skills in leadership at Ukweli Catholic Center in Kisumu. A Catholic center in Kisumu, yes.
Yeah, when you talk about these 36 who are now already on remand after being charged with terrorism, I want us to understand, for how long were they going to spend in Kenya? But also, this came at a time when Kenya was at the height of those protests, the youth Gen Z protests. But also, that was also at a time when Uganda was also, the young people were also planning to protest in a protest to Parliament. Maybe government thought that these people had gone to maybe get those kids, the training you're talking about. Maybe in their wisdom, they thought that they had gone to also participate in that Kenyan protest. Also
if we had
get
a
skills.
functional government, it wouldn't just think or imagine. It would do investigations and find out that these are actually Ugandans, leaders who had gone to do a training in leadership skills. And to answer your other question about the demonstrations that were happening in Kenya and in Uganda, if you have attended trainings before, especially outside your country or even in the country, these are things that you plan, you know, for a period of 4 months, 5 months, or even sometimes even 6 months. So this was not something that happened just because there were demonstrations there. This is something that we had taken a very long time planning. Like you might be aware, there are requirements required. You must have travel documents. Some of the people that traveled didn't have travel documents. We had to process them. You must have yellow fever. You must also have some money for upkeep. We paid accommodation.
Government was aware.
We paid accommodation in Kisumu. So these are not things that happen in a week. These are things that also required us to part with some money. So this is not something that happened in 1 week or 1 month. So there is no way we can relate this to what was happening in Kenya. There's no way we can relate to this to what is happening in Uganda. So if we had a functional government, there's no way they would just imagine or suspect, and then they say we are arresting these people and we are charging them with terrorism.
At least I've seen a letter that was circulating on social media, believed to have been authored by the governor of Kisumu, also condemning the arrests. But on the Ugandan side, we see these people being detained and also imprisoned or on remand. Yes. What does this speak about the harmony between the two East African countries? But also, now you're going to Kenyan High Commission, but also Kenya, through the governor, has already protested this arrest.
Well, it's the governor, but I also saw the regional commander of Nyanza, Patrick Tito, also making a comment to the effect that he wasn't aware that some Ugandans were arrested from there. So we are waiting also, because this should not only stop at the governor level. We are talking about Ugandans being arrested in Kenya. We are waiting for Ruto to also make a comment. What does he say about this breach of trust that we are witnessing currently? So we are waiting to also hear from the president of Kenya as to why our colleagues were arrested from there. And by the way, I don't want us to take this lightly. For those who are watching NTV, we have some of our colleagues who were tortured. And as we talk, one of our ladies in Luzira, Grace, is passing blood. You know, they were tortured to that level. Therefore, we cannot simply watch and wait for the courts to pronounce themselves on that.
This is a human rights violation, if true.
Yes, it's a human rights violation. It's a human rights violation. We have some other of our colleagues in Chitalia, the men. They are also going through the same. They were severely tortured. Reasons, you know, they had gone for leadership training. So we're not going to simply sit. We are going to fight for the rights of our colleagues. We are going to demand that they are freed with immediate effect. Do not be mistaken that what happened yesterday is going to stop at that. No, we are going to continue protesting. We are going to try again to go to the High Commission, but we shall also involve the East African community, and where need be, we shall also involve the United Nations.
Okay, I want to go back to studio, but before that, I want to also understand, as this happens, we have the members of parliament from East Africa, even these ones from Uganda, representing Uganda to East African Forum. But also, we have a parliament here where we even have members of FDC sitting in our Ugandan parliament. Have Ugandan leaders done enough? But also, are you seeing this as a political witch hunt that is being meted by the executive on you, the FDC leaders, as you wait for your delegation meeting?
This is a political witch hunt. What other explanation would one have for torturing and abducting Ugandans who went through the legal channels for them to be in Kenya? Yes, we have members of parliament, and indeed they have raised these concerns on the floor of parliament. I saw Honorable Semuju raising the same. I saw also Honorable Segon and many other of our colleagues, opposition colleagues in parliament, raising this concern. Yes.
I want to go back to Chris again, who is having George Musisi and Dr. Sarah Bireete with Tolit there. But your final word to them, as you, the FDC leaders who are now out on remand, on bail, are you still going to move to Kenya High Commission? Are you still vowing to move?
Oh yes, we are going to continue doing that. Yesterday was an attempt, and we never succeeded in reaching the Kenyan High Commission. But also, as you might be aware, 10 of our colleagues yesterday were remanded. So we are going to do many things at the same time. But yes, we are going to go to the High Commission again. And we expect to be received at the High Commission, not to be arrested, not to be stopped as witnessed yesterday. Yes. When is that? No, we shall let you know. You'll see us definitely.
Thank you so much. That is Her Worship Doreen Nyanjula, the Deputy Lord Mayor, Lord Mayor of Kampala, Capital City Authority. Handing you back to Chris Ganye, who is having a panel of experts in the studios.
Thank you, Stephen Mbide, for bringing us the Deputy Lord Mayor, Her Worship Doreen Nyanjula. And of course, she has been very elaborate about the fact that the Forum for Democratic Change and other parties are willing to go to the United Nations and have already instituted processes to ensure that the East African courts are able to hear this particular case in order for the justice dispensation to be expedited, at least to its logical conclusion. As we enter the final bend of the Kickstarter discussion, ladies and gentlemen, I would like you to submit on the sentiment aired there by the FDC official as we do a wrap, and also give us what is no doubt the way forward. Let me begin with Sarah Bireete.
Yeah, I associate myself with the submissions of the Deputy Lord Mayor, Doreen Nyanjula. But in addition to this, I wish, you know, the treaty provides for 2 months within which citizens of the East African community can challenge a violation of the treaty and its attendant protocols. In this case, Kenya has not only violated the East African Treaty, but they have also violated the Common Market Protocol. So the FDC legal team needs to file, as well as other human rights defenders. We need to file a challenge in the East African Court of Justice to have them pronounce themselves on the conduct of President Ruto's government when it comes to endangering the lives of the East African citizens within the community. In addition, I want to share a brief on hot pursuit. Under what circumstances can a country be allowed to enter with its forces in another country to pursue a perceived enemy? We have had hot pursuit operations. For example, the Garamba operation, Operation Lightning Thunder in DRC in Garamba Forest, was an act of hot pursuit, but it had to follow bilateral processes. And the DRC army, as well as the Uganda army, had an agreement and even a period through which the UPDF could enter Garamba Forest and pursue Joseph Kony and his elements in DRC. They got one extension and finished the operation and came out. So you cannot wake up in the night and kidnap citizens in another country. It's a kidnap, it's a raid, and there's no other name you can call this act. And it's a shame.
Dr. Tolit Atiya, William Ruto is being urged by the FDC leaders and indeed all human rights defenders to issue a statement with regard to this particular violation of the rights of the citizens of the East African community. Do you see him doing that?
That catches me off guard. Well, I do not think Kenya is going to issue a statement that will speak directly to the obligations that it's required. Because why? You'll find that, but there are a number of things in play. For me, other than the legal issues, as Sarah ably puts them out, for me the actual elephant in the room here is the question of the peace architecture of the region that is really being kicked right below the belt. Because we have already said Kenya finds itself in a very awkward position. Because, you see, there are a number of treaties, let alone the East Africa Community Treaty. There are also international treaties. For instance, the treaties relating to persons, you know, running away from political persecution and all this. You'll find many of these under the Vienna Treaty, the additional protocols. So if Kenya is supposed to issue a statement, it should come clear to a number of these obligations that it already finds itself undersigned to. And I think that is going to be very difficult for it. What I actually see going on, and we already see happening, is that Kenya has adopted a strategy. The official position of Kenya is silence. And I think, yes, and I think this now needs to be countered. We need to see some new voices in all this. I think Musisi has said, we need to get out of the tendency of saying this is so and so's issue. Okay. If we're looking at a collective, you know, peace and security element in the region, one particular culprit that I would want to see come out in this particular issue is the Uganda Law Society. Uganda Law Society. We have a lawyer who is a member of Uganda Law Society. The silence is loud. Is there any change to that in the next few hours?
I want to give my president and the executive a benefit of doubt. You know, they have had their hands full running after securing the peaceful protesters.
No doubt. Very commendable work, by the way.
I also know that some lawyers in Kenya have petitioned the Kenyan Law Society, which is quite vibrant when it comes to civil liberties, to put their security agencies to task to explain, were these people fugitives in Kenya, were they fugitives in Uganda, who arrested, who was their deportation order, because legally it doesn't make any sense. I've told you it's not an extradition, it's not a deportation. And Kenya has more questions to answer, partly because we're used to the harassment of Uganda, but people largely peacefully access their country. That's right. They lawfully entered through immigration. So if you allowed people to enter for 24 hours earlier, what has so changed that you can't even let them break for you to arraign them before any form of a hearing? All right. Yes, so it's incumbent upon the citizens of both countries to put these governments to task.
All right, thank you very much, George Musisi, a lawyer, for that perspective that wraps up this Kickstarter conversation examining Kenya's extradition of members of the Forum for Democratic Change. It's been a pleasure, and all your submissions have no doubt emboldened our understanding of matters extradition or kidnap of citizens in cross-border incidents. That will do it for our Kickstarter discussion, but take note, we'll be coming up next. There's a lot we are going to be talking about: tackling climate change and disaster preparedness, the declining voluntarism and crisis response. Do stay with us.